I'll ask the clerk, is there a supplementary agenda this evening?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. There is not a supplementary agenda. However, I would like to note that item 8J, the last planning application for this evening with regards to Digger Right Excavating at 23273 Prince Albert Road, has been withdrawn by the client.
Next item on the agenda deals with disclosure of pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, or general nature thereof. I'd ask counsel. Councillor Foss, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a pecuniary interest on item 8I. My property abuts that property.
Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
Yes, I have a declare a conflict on item 8A as I'm named in it.
Councillor Summit, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 12C. I've made this declaration before with respect to 18 Dolson. It's mentioned in the report.
Okay. Councillor Robertson, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Items 8B, my corporation is a tenant in that property. And item 13B, my corporation bestows membership rights to CKHA.
Further?
Yeah. Just so for clarity, the corporation I work for bestows membership rights to CKHA.
Seeing no others, let's deal with the first item on the agenda. Deals with planning services administration.
Planning meeting process. The process to be followed for each application will be as follows. 1. The municipal file number and its location. 2. The mayor will ask if there is anyone present other than the applicant or his or her agent with an interest in the application, and to indicate so by raising their hand. If there is no one present indicating an interest in the application, council will proceed as follows. 1. There will be no presentation by administration. 2. Administration will be asked if they wish to make additional comments regarding the report or recommendations. 3. Individuals or their agent present with an interest in the application other than the applicant will be asked to proceed to the podium, provide their name and address council with their comments, concerns, or questions. 4. Council will be asked if it has any questions of each presenter. 5. The applicant will be asked if he or she has any comments. 6. Council will be asked if it has any questions of the applicant. 7. Administration will be asked if they have any comments based on any discussion that may have occurred. 8. Council will be asked what action it wishes to take with regard to the application. Notice. If any person or public body that files an appeal of a decision of council in respect of the proposed applications does not make oral or written submissions to the municipal clerk of the corporation of the municipality of Chatham-Kent before the proposal is approved, they are not entitled to appeal the decision to the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party to the appeal. Notice of passing. Information on council's actions tonight will be posted on the municipal website, www.chatham-kent.ca. All persons receiving notice of this meeting will receive a notice of the passing of a bylaw relating to any of the planning applications presented here tonight, if approved, including appeal procedures. Any other person who wishes to receive a notice of passing or a notice of council's decision must submit a written request to the municipal clerk.
Let's deal with the first item.
8A, applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendment. Carmen McGregor, 8132 and 8142 Starkweather Line, Community of Chatham Township, North Kent.
Is there applicant, his or agent here? Please indicate by raising their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? Please raise their hands. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Foss, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations.
It's been moved by Councillor Foss and seconded by Councillor Bakuder. And any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now before you. I don't have my screen on for some reason. We'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
8B, application for consent, Tatro Properties Limited, 745 Richmond Street, Community of Chatham City.
Is the applicant, his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. Do not recognize the applicant. Then anyone present wishing to speak to this application, please raise their hand. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Myers, please.
Your Worship, I'd move all the recommendations.
It's been moved by Councillor Myers and seconded by Councillor Brock McGregor. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendations now brought before you. I will turn to the clerk.
Councillor Pinto. Councillor Salmon. All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Thank you. Let's deal with the next application, please.
Point of order, Mayor Hope.
Yes.
For the same reasons that I cited with 8B, we all know how I like to remain lily-white on these matters. I would also declare conflict on 8C. Thank you.
So noted. To the clerk.
8C, application for consent, Tatro Properties Limited, 750 to 800 Richmond Street, 100 Bothwell Street, and Bothwell Street, Community of Chatham City.
The applicant and his or agent present, and if so, please raise their hands. I do not recognize the applicant. Is anyone present wishing to speak to this application? Please raise their hands. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Brock McGregor, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I'll move the recommendations.
It's been moved by Councillor Brock McGregor, seconded by Councillor Bondi. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendations now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
Councillor Oche. All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
8D, application for zoning bylaw amendment, Robert and Lorelei Arnold, 24424 Center Side Road, Community of Chatham Township.
Is the applicant, his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. Do not recognize the applicant. Is anyone present wishing to speak to this application? Please raise their hand. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Foss, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations.
It's been moved by Councillor Foss, seconded by Councillor Oche. Any comments or questions from council? Then seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendations now brought before you. Turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Let's deal with the next.
8E, application for zoning bylaw amendment, Eric Brinkman and Janae Brinkman, 16 Young Street, Community of Tilbury.
Is the applicant, his or agent present? And if so, please raise your hand. I recognize the applicant. Is there anyone present wishing to speak to this application? Please raise their hand. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Fluker, please.
Very pleased to move the recommendation.
It's been moved by Councillor Fluker and seconded by Councillor Oche. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Let's deal with the next application, please.
Application for zoning bylaw amendment, Keenan McNeil, Brian and Odette McNeil, 57 Main Street East, Community of Ridgetown, East Kent.
Is the applicant, his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is there anyone present wishing to speak to this application? Please raise their hands. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councilor Pincinel, please.
Thank you, Worship. I'd be happy to move the recommendations.
And seconded by Councilor Van Dam. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendations now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Let's deal with the next application, please.
Application for zoning bylaw amendment 2642466 Ontario Inc., 650 Riverview Drive, Community of Chatham City.
Is the applicant, his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? Please raise their hand. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councilor Couturin, please.
I make a motion to pass that.
Okay. It's been moved by Councilor Couturin, seconded by Councilor Bondi. Any comments or questions from council? Then seeing none, I would ask council to consider the recommendations now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-1.
Next item on the agenda, please.
Application for zoning bylaw amendment, Crosshair Ventures, Inc., 830 Richmond Street, Community of Chatham City.
Is the applicant, his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is there anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? Please raise their hand. And seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councilor Fluker?
Pleased to move the recommendation, Your Worship.
And seconded by Councilor Bondi. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-1.
Next application.
Application for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and site plan approval. Kevin Turney and Lily Swowski, 620 Cross Street, Community of Dresden.
Is the applicant, his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is there anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? Please raise their hand. I have one. Go ahead. Oh, two. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. The subject property for this application is located at the southwest corner of the intersection of Robinson Street and Cross Street in the community of Dresden. The property is approximately 1,375 square meters, or 15,000 square feet in area, and it contains one existing building, which for many years operated as the DeBurger Funeral Home. The property is designated residential area in the Chatham-Kent official plan, and it is zoned in a site-specific residential low-density zone, which permits a single detached dwelling and a funeral home. The property identified in this slide in the yellow circle is generally surrounded by low-density residential uses. These uses consist of abutting single detached dwellings to the south and west of the property, and 4 other single detached dwellings are located on the remainder of the block. And 2 other single detached dwellings are located across each of the abutting streets. A municipal alley is located between the property and the lot to the immediate east, and this alley had been used almost exclusively as part of the funeral home use to access existing parking area to the rear of the building on the property. Several multi-unit residential dwellings are also present in the broader area. Jackson Park, a municipal park, is located on the block kitty corner or northeast of the property, and Jackson Park contains a baseball diamond, playground equipment, and passive green space. Downtown Dresden is located to the northeast beyond Jackson Park, approximately 2.5 blocks away. The site-specific zoning on the property, as I said, permits a funeral home and single detached dwelling, as well as other types of low-density residential uses. The applicants acquired the property in March of 2017 with plans to transition it into a new and viable use. The main purpose of the application is to rezone the property to permit the redevelopment of the existing building into one of two uses. The first is an 8-unit residential apartment, and the second is a 13-unit hotel. The applicants are requesting an official plan amendment to allow the commercial type use of a hotel in a residential neighborhood. The zoning bylaw amendment would be required to add a hotel and an 8-unit residential apartment dwelling as an additional permitted use in the zone. This is a photograph looking south at the subject property from Cross Street and looking at the west side of the property on the abutting street, Robinson Street. The applicant concurrently has applied for a site plan control approval. The purpose of site plan control is to allow the municipality to approve the layout of any physical changes to the site, which in the case of this application includes the addition of 7 standard parking spaces and 1 accessible space. These spaces are either located in the interior side yard off of the alley, more towards the rear of the building, as well as 2 standard spaces and 1 accessible space off of Richmond Street, directly off the right-of-way. The property is generally constrained for adding additional physical features due to the presence of large mature trees, and the building has been added onto over the years, and it has sprawled over the majority of the property. As well, to the northeast or northwest corner of the property, exists an in-ground swimming pool. Several concerns have been raised through one written submission to the planning department prior to the date of this hearing. The concerns are detailed in the letter which council has received. However, they can be summarized into 3 points, and this may not have captured all the points in the opinion of the letter writer, but if they're here, they could also speak following my presentation. The first was the uncertainty as to the proposed use. This relates to the fact that the applicant has applied for a zoning amendment to permit an 8-unit apartment and a 13-unit hotel. It is my understanding that it is the intention of the applicant to have the option as to which use he moves forward with should the zoning amendments be approved tonight. The second item noted is that there appears to be inadequate parking for the proposed uses on the property. As it relates to the residential use, it is the standard in the Chatham-Kent zoning bylaw that parking spaces are allotted for a dwelling converted into apartments at a rate of 1 space per 1 unit. In this case, it is my opinion that the parking proposed meets this provision of the zoning bylaw and is not an issue from a planning perspective. The second use being the 13-unit hotel, it's obvious that the application proposes a 13-unit hotel and there are only 8 parking spaces located on site. In review of the application, the need for parking on site and the need to preserve the physical features and characteristics of the property were weighed against one another, and the recommendation includes those 8 spaces to service the hotel, which also does not pose any planning issues in my opinion. If the application were to move forward with the requirement of more spaces, it would be required to physically alter the site, potentially by removing large mature trees or eliminating portions of the physical development on the site, such as the building or swimming pool area. The third concern raised in the letter was generally noise and nuisance related to impacts of the new use. With regards to the hotel in particular, the zoning bylaw specifically will prohibit banquet or meeting facilities, public restaurant or tavern as part of the hotel. These are uses of a hotel which are typical or ancillary of other larger scale hotels. It is the intent of the applicant to operate this hotel at a smaller scale, more like what they might refer to as an inn. Lastly, I have one point of clarification regarding the zoning bylaw itself as it's written. For clarity, I have amended the zoning bylaw to add a line indicating that these uses, if they are approved, are only permitted in an existing building. The bylaw was silent on that fact, and by adding this language, it will provide clarity that this building could not be removed in the future and a new building built in its place to house these uses. Thank you, Mayor Hope.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Clarity for Ryan. Councillor Fluker, please.
Just, I thought I heard you correctly. If this is a hotel, is it the intent that there be a restaurant and liquor license with this hotel?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. It is not the intent that there be a public restaurant. However, food service will be available.
I appreciate that, just for the residents,
for the guests.
for the tenants. Okay.
As far as the liquor license, I do not have that information. However, there would be no public tavern associated with this, and if there was, it would be solely for sale to guests in the hotel. The applicant is here. They may be able to clarify further on that point.
Yeah, okay. Is there a hotel right now in Dresden? Is this in competition to other hotels in Dresden?
There is no other traditional accommodation, hotel, motel, bed and breakfast anywhere in Dresden.
Not anywhere.
Not anywhere. I've spoken with representatives of the BIA in Dresden to gain some insight on this issue, and I was informed that guests attending family events such as weddings or reunions, or certain events such as Kinstock, the Demolition Derby, or etc., will stay either in Wallaceburg or in Chatham, or even in abutting municipalities. There are smaller scale uses in places like Petrolia.
Further comments? Clarity? Seeing none. Thank you, Ryan. The lady over here, please. Could you please come to the microphone, state your name, your address, and please address council.
Hi, I'm Nancy Richards. I live at 351 Robinson Street, just next door to the funeral home itself. It's the next building to the left if you're looking at the picture. And I do have concerns of the amendment that's being proposed. Start with, I moved in here 3 years ago, and being a residential area, funeral home I know was there. Traffic in that area, like there's not that many funerals. It was just temporary, like maybe a couple hours here and there. There was traffic in front of my place, which, you know, I can take that. There's only on the average 3 to 4 funerals per year or per month. So it's just minimal traffic. And I like the idea of it being residential rather than into commercial. It's going to be a lot busier. Be an increase in noise, increase of traffic, my privacy is being involved in here, and I'm just wondering how it would affect the cost or the value of my home down the road. Big concern is the parking issues. If it's a 13-room commercial type hotel, there's only 7 parking spaces, one's for disability people. So if the place is full, then where's these extra vehicles going to be parked? Are they going to be parked in front of my place, in front of my neighbor's places? Like just for, you know, viewing out my window, I expect some cars there, but I don't want them there all the time. They're going to pull up under my tree, and I'm maintaining the lawn, so there's that. I guess just the noise is another thing, but and with the apartment, again, it's 8 apartments, and yes, there would be 1 space per parking, but one of them is disability parking. So if a resident moves in, is it going to just be 1 person, 2 person? Are they still going to only have 1 car, or is each person going to have a car? So it could be if 2 people moved into the apartment as a couple, it could be up to 16 parking spaces that will be needed, so they'll be all around the area. And I have some other neighbors that, you know, that don't really, I understand he sent in a letter today. I don't know if it was received yet or not, but he did email it in. So he has concerns too about parking in front of his place at all times, which impacts visibility when you're pulling out. There's young children in the area, the park's in the area, so there's going to be, you know, children going in and out of this, or up and down the street. And so that's one of my big concerns. And I guess just the noise, because if people are working, I don't know if it's going to be, it was suggested it's going to be senior apartments, which, okay, that's fine, but that's no guarantee it's going to be senior apartments. Seniors typically, yeah, as they get older, they don't want the responsibility of the home, but they also don't want to do stairs. Is there going to be an elevator to accommodate these people? I'm not sure. But the big thing is the parking, the noise, and my bedroom backs up next to that laneway, so I'm going to get a lot of noise, and that's, maybe a small point. I can go back to bed, but that's not the issue. It's just the parking, and so that's my main concern is where are they going to put all these cars. One other comment, I believe you bought the place in 2016, not 17. I believe it's been empty for 2 years. So anyways, those are my main concerns. And the other thing, just getting back to the parking, there's not going to be 8 parking places in the winter, because when the previous owners lived there, they had it plowed out, and it was put in front of one of the garage doors. There's 3 garage doors. They would pile the snow in front of one of the garage doors, which would take up 2 parking places right there. So I don't know where they're going to put the snow. So that's just another comment about the parking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was one that wished to speak on this side. Would you please come to the microphone? Please state your name and your address, and please address council.
Good evening. My name is Doug Shaw. I live at 416 Hughes Street in Dresden. Most of my concerns were covered by the lady previous to me. I had a couple of other little things that I talked to even Ryan about. Number one was this building is not located on a main street, so I'm also wondering if we're looking at it from a viewpoint of access to find this location. Is there going to be signs put up on the main street indicating where this building is going to be, say if it does turn into a hotel? That was a concern. Again, I reconfirm what was prior to. I've talked to several neighbors around the area, and they have no problem looking at it from a residential standpoint, as far as a home or something like that. But when it comes to the hotel, that's where everybody seemed to be wanting to draw the line. So I don't want to hold everybody up, but that was our concern. I had the snow removal, and the parking was the biggest issue because I live just around the corner from there. And again, we don't have curbed areas along our streets. So it means that anybody that pulls off the main section of the road is actually on the grass that we have to maintain. So that's the biggest concern that I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To the applicant, I wonder if you may want to come and address. Welcome, Tom. I'm sure you heard most of the comments that are being made. Maybe you may be able to enlighten us a bit.
There we go. Thank you, Your Worship. I'm Tom Story for Story Samwise Planning. I'm here on behalf of Kevin Tierney, the applicant. Kevin sends his apologies. He had another event planned this evening. He's from the Guelph area, and but it was keen to get it on council as expeditiously as possible. I'll start with saying if this was a greenfield project, he had a vacant lot in the middle of a residential area, proposing maybe the residential part, but also the hotel part, with insufficient parking. There's no question I wouldn't be here supporting it. But you got to remember, this is an existing building. It's been maintained quite well. It adds value to the neighborhood, I would say. It has historical and architectural significance. It's on a heritage list, although it's not designated per se. So we got a balance here. Yes, there may be some on-street parking that's going to occur from time to time by people using it either as a hotel or as a residence. On the other hand, you've got someone willing to invest in maintaining this building the way it is today, because that's a lot of its value, and was going to attract people either as a residential use or as a hotel use. The idea that we'd have a dual zoning, that's unusual, but it's certainly not unheard of. We've got, in my previous life, I know we'd had several times where we had zoned property in various parts of Chatham-Kent for dual uses, depending on what the market conditions were and the developer decided to come forward. The notion of a hotel in Dresden, I go back to the Dresden Hotel, which was not a place of accommodation, and I suppose people who live in Dresden still have that notion that a hotel was for recreational drinking, I'll call it, on a regular basis, but not really a place of accommodation. Well, this is exactly the opposite, as Ryan mentioned, I think in response to Councillor Fluker. There's no intent to have any sort of public facility in there with regard to drinking or eating, except for the hotel residents themselves. As far as parking goes, as a funeral home, of course, and I attended visitation and funerals there over the years on several occasions. So you would have these events where there's no parking on site, and people were occupying on a peak demand period, were parking all over the side streets on street. We're moving to a situation where there will be occasional peak demand, but not very often. So for most times, all the parking that will be in demand at that site will be accommodated on site. If everyone is living there, they're all there at the same time, yeah, someone's going to have to park on the street. Same with the hotel. If everyone is there all at the same time, they won't be there all day likely, but they will be there in the evening. So yes, there will be parking on site. When I talk about the balance of trying to preserve this building, if it was torn down, that would be a loss to the neighborhood. If it was allowed to become derelict, clearly that wouldn't be good either. So in my view, typical for many small towns and trying to deal with zoning and OP problems and trying to maintain a community, an investment in a community, as opposed to a greenfield site somewhere else in Chatham-Kent. I think this is good planning. I appreciate what Ms. Richards was saying, and but overall, on balance, like I said, and I support the recommendations of the planning department in this regard. So that's my report.
Thank you. Comments or questions from council? Councillor Verkuttern, followed by Councillor Herman.
Tom, I have a quick question for you here. You say there's adequate parking, right? So the apartment building is being proposed and needs, what, 12 spaces? 1.5 per unit, right?
I think 1 per unit.
I don't know.
That's what Ryan said, 1 per unit for residential use.
But it is residential. The apartment building will be residential.
Yeah, so it's one per unit.
So that's the 8 spaces.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about the existing building. Well, the existing building was not a hotel, right? So there's different use. The people there are getting lots of calls on this, and I just want to know if you don't think that that's going to devalue the local homes in that area. Well, Tom, I've been at this, 45 years in real estate, I should know. and I've done lots and lots of appraisals for banks. I know for sure it's going to be devaluing some of it. I know it, because that's the one issue when you bring a customer down. They want to see the neighborhood. And I'll tell you right now, that would make a difference. I'm sorry, I have to tell you, but I know everybody likes to see this passed maybe, but I'm having a difficult time with it.
You got me by 1 year, Frank. I've only been doing this 44 years, so I can't say for certain what the effect on real estate values will be with this new proposed use. I suspect the effect on them, if this project doesn't go through, will be greater, because the building will either be demolished or allowed to become derelict is a strong possibility. So you've got a building that's got historical, architectural heritage value. It's a credit to the neighborhood right now in its present form, and I think keeping it that way is the best thing for the neighborhood.
Well, they're also talking a hotel here. You're not talking funeral home. You're not taking the same hours as you would if it's a funeral home. I'm talking what, they're probably open till midnight. Some of these people are complaining about it, and I don't know, they called me, okay, I went to have a look. I kind of sympathize with some of them. There's some nice homes there, and I honestly feel that we're taking maybe possibly 20% of the value away because of that. That's my opinion. If these homes were sitting without that obstruction, I honestly would make a difference. And that's my feeling on it, and that's why I'm going to be supporting.
Thank you. Councillor Herman?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Actually, my question has taken another little bit of a turn after the previous speaker. I just have to say, certainly I hear that the parking spaces is number one. The two speakers that we just heard this evening, that is their major concern. So I guess back to you with that, Tom. I mean, if they had a visitor come to them, if this is the apartment building and they have visitors, are they parking on the road? Is there any plans on your client that he or she would look at this, that maybe it's a possibility down the line that we're going to expand the parking lot? And how would planning department, how could that, I mean, we would hear that from our residents. It's not working out, or it is working out. We need to have a follow-up if whatever the decision may be. What would your clients say to the possibility of expansion in the future for that parking?
I wouldn't rule it out. I would say that. We've talked about it as a possibility. But the opportunity for that doesn't exist today. It may come to exist in the future. Some property becomes available either next door or somewhere in the neighborhood where they could sort of park remotely. I think Kevin would be willing to look seriously at that. He would prefer to have all the parking requirements met, make it a lot easier, but he needs to do something to create revenue from that building in order for him to do something else like buy other property to provide the extra parking. So like I said, I can't guarantee it. I don't know of any way of requiring it, except that he would, like I said, we talked about it, and he hasn't ruled that possibility out. And in our own, I'll call them private discussions on the matter.
And that would be something that we could have them, you and the planning department discuss further. I look at this building as well, and kudos to the owner. I think, quite frankly, it's about preservation of history is very important to us in our communities as well. Any of us that have traveled around have seen that there are good news stories and there are bad news stories, of course, as well. So it's our due diligence to make certain those bad news stories don't happen in a neighborhood that has been accustomed to their lifestyle and their way of living. So with that being said, the hotel, if I hear correctly, it's also a possibility for a hotel versus also possibility of apartment building. The hotel, I can think of, we've done things like that previously, have we not? Maybe that's a planning department question, Mayor Hope, that have we done anything similar to this of recent, since, I mean, in the last 20 years, I guess? And Tom, you've been around, so obviously you can probably answer that question.
I don't recall an actual hotel. We've looked at certainly 3 and 4 unit B&Bs, I would call them, from time to time. And that's what this would be. It's closer to a bed and breakfast than anything else, but it's larger with more units than you would find in a standard bed and breakfast. But that's the kind of facility we're looking at. Brian mentioned, of course, that in talking to the Dresden BIA, that there seems to be a demand for a hotel. There isn't one in Dresden for any sort. And that's one of the reasons Mr. Tierney looked at this location. Now, when he first looked, the slots were still in Dresden, and he wasn't happy to hear they were leaving. But he decided to stick with it when he and I talked about that as well. So there's nothing else there, Kevin. I think a use like that would be welcome by the community at large.
Well, accommodations like this happen in other communities, and maybe this is something that we need to look at more so in ours. Yeah. I know in the Blenheim community we lack accommodations, and we need entrepreneurs in our communities to see that we can open up and be willing hosts to broaden our welcoming mat to many people outside our communities. Thank you.
Absolutely. If I could, Your Worship, just one last thing in response to Councillor Herman. The other thing Kevin and I talked about with regard to off-site parking, like on another lot, is how well that would be received by the neighborhood as well, because it would mean basically buying an existing dwelling, removing it and turning that lot into parking. We've seen that happen before. I have, certainly, on many occasions, and it's never a popular undertaking. So that's something else to weigh. If there really is a parking problem, he'll have to do something, I think, but what that would be exactly, I don't know.
Councillor Robertson, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. And I concur with a lot of the sentiments of Councillor Herman, and certainly appreciate the comments made by the 2 residents and thank them for making their comments today, because it's important for us to hear that sort of feedback when we're deliberating on these planning matters, and that's what this is. And so we need to abide by the proper planning principles that we have before us today as well. And so, as it relates to the parking, certainly the residents have brought forward a concern. In any business planning, so my question is through yourself, Mayor Hope, to Mr. Story. In any business planning, has the owner of the property, have they, through their business projections, maybe identified how many days a year would they expect the property to be at full occupancy? Because there's only, to me, at least what I'm hearing, there's only a parking problem when you exceed the number of occupants to overflow the lot. Has there been any dialogue on that front, Mr. Story?
Only on a sort of an annual basis is how many occupants there might be over a longer period of time, as opposed to like a daily issue. Yeah. Like I said in my first response, I'm sure there'll be times when the building will be full and the parking will be on street as well as on site. But by far, the amount of time that might be when the parking spills out, I suppose for the success of the building, I hope in a way, I hope it's a lot, but would it be?
Sure.
Kevin's sort of break-even point on moving ahead suggested an overall occupancy of, I think, 50 or 60%.
Right, that would seem reasonable to me. I think one of the things that we fall trapped to is the inferences of property value and other events of that nature when change occurs in our neighborhoods. And so I hate drawing the inference of property value decreasing for the reason of a property being maintained. Because I tend to agree with Tom's comments earlier related to the dereliction of the property will be far more damaging, and we've seen that in other areas in our community where the dereliction of property, no question, reduces the value of the surrounding properties. And so I think anything that can be done in this event to preserve a piece of our history, our heritage, and ensure a viable business is operating is to our benefit. And I think the Councillor Herman touched on the matter related to a real gap that we have in every corner of Chatham-Kent, and that's hotel space. It's a gap in Chatham. It's a gap in Dresden, clearly. Certainly in South Kent, as Councillor Herman has alluded, and I suspect right across every corner of our community. And so, I will be supporting this. I don't believe that there's that the inference of property value decline in the surrounding is going to be a problem. And I think what we've seen from others that have come to this table before with similar applications, whereby the residents have real concerns, and these are real concerns, let's be no doubt, but that the owner of the property, his business is best succeeds when those around him are positive influences to his business plan. And so therefore, in my opinion, I think that we'll likely see a property owner that's going to want to listen to the needs of this community, and I believe that all the best planning principles are evident in this application, and therefore I'll support.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Oche, please.
Through your worship, actually to Ryan, if I could.
Just lean over a bit more towards Councillor Bondi's microphone, please.
Ryan, could you tell me if it did not make it as a hotel, would it be able to go to an apartment then under this zoning?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Yes, council would have the option to move forward with the zoning to an apartment.
Okay. I just, Councillor Fluker would be able to agree. We had a motel, I guess we called them back then, in Tilbury that couldn't make it. Not that there was a lot of money put on it, looked nothing like this, believe me. But I just, I got mine working, sorry. I'd love to see if this goes through, and I'm hoping it would work out. I think it would be less people probably during the week and that than would be in an apartment building, I would think. I don't know if there was a study done that through with you, Tom, if you, what you...
It would depend on the time of the day, the time of the year, if there was a wedding or a funeral or some other event in Dresden that there was a demand for all 13 spaces, then that parking would exceed whatever it would be the demand from an apartment building. But over a period of time, this is the way I look at it, looking at it as a funeral home, where there was parking all over the place and all over the streets there, on occasion, 3 or 4 times a month, I think, as Miss Richards said. And then we've got occasional parking. Probably during the week, there would be no off-street parking or very little, or on-street parking, sorry, from a hotel use. And probably for an apartment building, probably evening you would see cars on the street, but during the day, not. So,
well, I'm hoping if this does go through, that Kevin definitely would work with the neighbors on any problems that they have.
He wants to be a good neighbor. He wants to succeed. I know he did talk to Nancy on the phone. He said it was an amiable conversation. Hopefully she would agree. But they didn't resolve anything either. So,
okay, thank you.
Further comments or questions? Just Tom and Ryan, one question I got. I noticed there's a pool there. Does anybody know the age of the pool?
I suggested it be removed, but he said no. So I'm not sure. It's been there quite a while. It was for, well, it was a funeral home. It was for the use of the...
Well, that's what I was wondering. A swimming pool at a funeral home, unless it was a cold, dead cold or something, I'm not sure. But I'm just trying to understand, because I'm hearing the issue about parking, you know, and part of the site plan. I mean, I could see it for residents and swimming and stuff like that there, and it's an amenity. But when I look at it from a bed and breakfast, I'm going to call it a bed and breakfast type style. Wouldn't it make more sense that the space that is actually being occupied by a pool, because if you're only using it as a bed and breakfast, which means people are coming in, sleeping 1 or 2 nights, and then leaving. I mean, they're not there for a week of swimming and relaxation and sunshine in the hotel. I just wanted to raise that because I'd seen in none of the notes, nothing was ever mentioned about. And it looks like it's a fairly decent sized pool. I mean,
I discussed that with him too, exactly along those lines. And before he fills it in and uses it for parking, he wanted to see if it was useful as a marketing tool.
Okay. I get that. So as long as I know that somebody has had discussions around that issue, because none of the briefing material even made mention of that area space that is being utilized, and I just wanted to better understand if it was discussed, and I appreciate that. Yes. Any further comments by council? And seeing none, need a motion? Councillor Herman.
I'll move the recommendation.
It's been moved by Councillor Herman, seconded by Councillor Van Dam. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendations now brought before you. Now turn to the clerk.
Councillor Fluker. All votes are in. Motion passes 15-1.
That concludes our part of the planning portion of our agenda. Now we'll move into the regular session of council.
Mayor Hope, I think there's some Prince Albert people here. Are they aware that that's been pulled?
Yep.
Okay.
I said it.
Thank you.
Going to move on to the next part of our regular course of our agenda, dealing with the regular council meeting. And I'm going to move to the next item, which deals with deputations as of 3 o'clock, and I'll turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. This evening we have 3 deputations on the items on the current agenda. I will remind all 3 speakers that they have a maximum of 5 minutes to speak on their item. We'll start with the first one, which is Martina Roche, and her item is item 14C, which is the motion of Councillor Oche regarding the crosswalk at Jeffrey and Helen Streets, Tilbury. Welcome, Martina. On deck will be Laurie Marshall.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and my name is Melissa Harrigan. I'm pleased to introduce Martina in the video that she made regarding Councillor Oche's motion tonight. Tilbury is very lucky to have individuals like Martina in our community, a safety-focused, community-minded individual who is able to rally the community around a very important safety issue after experiencing personal tragedy. Her petition, which she will present tonight, has around 1,000 signatures, which is just incredible. And while we know that there may be some limitations in terms of what this council can do around the crosswalk, we wanted to really show council and emphasize the community nature of Councillor Oche's motion tonight. Through a video.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here to present my video. I now present our signed petitions, and I thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you. Next presenter.
Next presenter is Lori Marshall, President and CEO of the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance, with regards to item 13B, the application for site plan control, Chatham-Kent Health Alliance, 325 Margaret Ave, community of Wallaceburg. On deck will be Cindy Soni.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Hope and members of council. It's my desire this evening to share with you just a little bit greater context with respect to the overall long-term master plan for the Wallaceburg site of Chatham-Kent Health Alliance in support of the motion that's coming forward to you this evening. I want to really begin my presentation by just acknowledging how far Chatham-Kent Health Alliance has come in the last few years. We have a new vision for the organization, Together Growing a Healthier Community, a new mission that really reinforces and solidifies our commitment to 2 sites, so our one team, 2 sites serving Chatham and rural Kent, and our values that really form the basis of the organization. I would also like to share with you that we have some preliminary results with respect to how we're doing. We have seen increased patient satisfaction, increased staff satisfaction. We just achieved over 99% of the accreditation standards, and we have a balanced budget. So we're well on our way back to, I would say, a healthy organization, and one that I believe this community can be proud of. With respect to our planning overall for Chatham-Kent Health Alliance, there are some important things that we've learned through our community consultation throughout our communities across Chatham-Kent, as well as working with our staff and physicians and volunteers. And we have a very special group called the Rural Health Advisory Committee that have helped us with this. The first is really then embedding of the 2 sites in Wallaceburg and Chatham. And just like a mall needs an anchor store, we speak about those particular sites being anchored by emergency departments. We know 24/7 emergency departments, very, very important in our communities, and that there are beds in each of those sites and ambulatory services there as well. We wanted to respond to community needs. One of the things we heard in particular in Wallaceburg is the desire for dialysis in the longer term, and it needs to be affordable. So what you'll see here this evening is really a presentation that allows us to do a more staged approach as opposed to a big bang with respect to the Wallaceburg site that will eventually have it have almost a new, completely new facility. And it allows us to present a series of $10 million projects or less that changes the level of approval required at government. And then also makes it more affordable for our community. We have done feasibility studies through our foundation to ensure that we would be able to provide and support the community portion that would be required for these particular changes. And we also believe that this is really a longer-term plan that allows us to look towards the potential for co-location of other services with the Alliance as well. So this first plan is the one that is before you this evening, and it speaks to really the site planning of that new power plant, which is the green or aqua-colored portion on this particular picture, the gray being the existing Wallaceburg facility. And that new power plant is required in order for us to do any changes throughout the facility. The aging power plant needs to be replaced, and we are currently at stage 3.2 of the ministry's process with respect to moving ahead with that. We have secured the funding for that, and there is also no community ask that will go out with respect to funding this particular power plant. And this is the situation that is required before we can do anything else. Further stages of development, so this is the next stage that we would be submitting, and what you see in the lower area here is that this part of the current site would be demolished, and that is the part that currently is sitting in mostly the floodplain, as well as this is where we house our current diagnostic imaging, laboratory, and rehabilitation services. And so what you will see is that there is a new build then, in addition to the power plant that would be in place, that would add diagnostic imaging, the lab, and rehabilitative services here. And then there's the provisional ask for hemodialysis services to move to Wallaceburg as well at that stage. The next stage, that again would be likely a number of years out, then starts to look at moving what are the current emergency department services into another new build located here. And then the final stage really looks towards not only the emergency department being here, but outpatient clinics being inserted in here, and then the existing space here would really be administrative kinds of support. So you can see that at the final stage of the plan, in over a course of 15 to 20 years, we essentially end up with a brand new facility. I will end there. I just want to, though, also note that we will be hosting an open house at the Wallaceburg site for the community to come and see November the 29th. We'll have all of these different poster boards up, as well as also having the opportunity for people to tour and see the site and understand where it is we're talking about. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Next presenter.
And the last speaker under deputations is Cindy Soni, and it's under item 12C, results of request for proposal R18-22233, developing affordable housing option 2.
Welcome.
Your legal duty to consult is with me. The definition of Aboriginal title is me. And I was erased out of the Bible in the 1500s, Numbers 21:14. We didn't sell any land. There's no bill of sale. I have clear title to North America, fee simple absolute. And when you look at my family tree on the male side, which is posted on the internet, go back to the 1818 St. Mary's Treaty, signed October 6th. You'll see the name John Baptist Richardville. And you follow that family tree all the way down to Stuart John. He's the definition of national, because we didn't sell no land. I own 33% of the world's wealth. Legal duty to consult is with me on anything you guys do. And in that Chatham Voice, last year when I was on the front page, and it says all the legal authorities know, they know. I gave the paperwork to Andrea Horvath of the NDP in 2014. I'm still being neglected, which is abuse. It says right in the paperwork, I'm holding the 1850 proclamation. And when you look at Walpole Island, there's not one legal documentation. Nobody out there will show their family tree. As a hereditary chief, I was erased out of the 1952 Indian Act. Or I was recognized in the 52 and then erased by 1985. The definition of federal means Canada and the United States. And you can find that in the United States Article 6 Constitution. Confederation is the same as the Constitution. And treaties are the supreme law of the land. And all this is coming out. And I didn't want to sideswipe you guys because you've already neglected me for a very long time, over a year. Neglect is abuse. We didn't sell no land. I'm already written out of the Bible. You guys recognized it, not you guys, but John Marshall, if you look in the United States Justice, and you can see he recognized the clan mother as the owner. Our traditional system didn't change. Our heritage didn't change. Our heritage is the same. We had space invaders come in, wipe out Kent County, wipe out the hereditary chiefs, and now we got elected chiefs impersonating me. So I'm a little offended because I'm a registered Indian, and that means I'm a non-treaty Indian. And they're trying to hide me by calling me a registered Indian. There's not one documentation on Walpole Island, so every day I got to get up and I got to fight everybody for the truth. Well, you guys get to all celebrate your heritage in my house, and I don't get to do anything but continue to fight daily. So that's why I'm here, because I'm sick of it. I've gone to court with Samsung. I took them on all by myself, and they can't do nothing because I own the land. I've been abused. I've called your office several times. I've probably called many of you people or done something to get to the point that if I was standing here in court, the NDP have all the paperwork. That's why I shoot my mouth off and you guys, everybody ignores me. When the paperwork is there, it's tangible, it's legit. And I'm sick of talking over and over and over again. When I can sit here and if you guys want, I can show you everything that proves all of this and why I can still stand and keep talking when you guys keep taking me to court, arresting me, abusing me in my own house when we didn't sell any land. There's no sales receipt. There's no bill of sale. You look at owner in the legal definition, it all goes back to me. 33% of the world's wealth, so I got to sit here and fight everybody. from Donald Trump to Justin Trudeau. All of you people ignore me. Walpole Island knows exactly what they're doing to me. Dan Muskogeman knows it. They all know it. There's not one legal documentation, and you can research all this, and that's why I keep fighting for the people, because it's called the betterment of all, and the new rule of law is love rules, and if there's no love in the equation, it's wrong, because I'm tired of being abused by everybody. I got my stuff all over the internet, and I've been doing it for 10 years. Nobody calls me on it, and when they do, they lose in court, because it's true. So I'm here tonight just to say I'm sick of repeating myself decade after decade, being abused. It's got to stop. Legal duty to consult is with me. You're in my house, and you better recognize, because I'm putting it all on the internet. The NDP already know. Everybody knows. It's not a secret. And it says right there in the Chatham Voice paper. All the legal authorities know. I've had my say. I'm willing to teach you guys what's going on. You got to stop abusing the real original inhabitants. I'm the oldest bloodline on North America. Yet, you take all our reservations put together, we live on the size of, what, Vancouver Island? Every reservation is not too far from a chemical spill or nuclear whatever, and this and that. Stop abusing us, the real original inhabitants, not the elected. It's our house. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda deals with the consent agenda. Councillor Verkutteren.
I'll move the consent agenda from number 10A1 to 10D6.
Okay, so moved. Seconded by Councillor Fluker. Any items of interest? Councillor Fluker.
Yes, I have two, 10B4 and 10B5. And I think probably, Your Worship, that it probably goes back to Mr. Kelly, I think. We've already heard a delegation regarding crosswalks.
Well, not yet, Councillor Fluker. Hold on. You got other items you want?
I want to deal with 4 and 5.
Okay, I'll come back to you in a second.
Thank you.
No other items? And seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, it's carried. Councillor Fluker, please.
Thank you. Very quickly, I note here, Mr. Kelly, that item 10B4, and we've already heard the delegation regarding pedestrian crossing installations in Blenheim, Tilbury, and Chatham. Oh, it's Mr. Seppi. Of course it would be Mr. Seppi. My point being, these crosswalks have now been approved. They have come forward to this council, and the one in Tilbury that we heard about, it has come forward at this council level. The impression I get, the next council has to approve the budget, and these crosswalks go in.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. That's correct, Councillor Fluker. We've reviewed those locations, and we've found that the pedestrian crossings are warranted, and so now it's a matter of funding to install them.
And so that funding will take place, the budget sessions do go January, February, so certainly once the budget gets approved, those things can go in March and April. I don't want you to give me an exact date, but generally the budget gets wrestled about in January, and then after that.
Well, thank you, Mayor Hope. Once the budget is approved and we know that the funding's available, then we'll need to go out and do the engineering work. And
I appreciate that. I can understand
so, I don't believe we would be able to get them installed in April.
In April, yeah. So that's certainly for the new school year, if not to the end of the year. Okay, I appreciate that. I did happen to meet the gentleman that was counting the trucks and cars going by and so on. He was out there twice, and I certainly did appreciate the count that he made. The second item, Queens Line and Merlion Road,
Councillor
and I'm looking at...
Before you begin.
I'm sorry, is there another question?
Is there any further comments about the pedestrian crosswalks? B4.
I'm sorry.
Councillor Pincinel, then followed by Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mark, I'd like to revisit the Ridgetown one again. Can I do that in the next council? I know we tried it twice.
Answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you very much. Mark, just a quick question. Can you I guess it is a question. Can you describe what a PXO Type B looks like for the people that might not know?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. As the Type B PXO, last year we had installed 5 of them, and they have the rapidly flashing lights on each side of the road, and they have street light to illuminate the crossing at night, and also signs that overhang. The locations of the current ones that we have are in Wheatley on Erie Street North. We have one in Tilbury, although that's a Type C, which doesn't have the overhead signs. We also have 2 in Chatham, one on Baldoon Road, north of Oxley Drive, one on LaCroix Street at Alexandra. We have one in Blenheim on Talbot Street West, right at Little Street, and the last one that we have is in Dresden. Well, it's right in front of the Dresden Public School.
All right. Just a couple of comments. I've been really critical in the past in regards to sometimes the process in which these get put in, or traffic and infrastructure issues in general. But I did want to say this was really good work. And I'm really happy about it, because this came to Karen, Frank, and myself in March. I even looked it up. It was March 26th that the Blenheim one came to us, and 6 months later, it's here at council. And I mean, I'm rounding. That's fantastic work, and I want to say thank you. The community certainly is appreciative of the efforts. It is going to go a long way to improve safety in our community. So on behalf of all the South Kent councillors, all councillors in general, thank you for this. This was really a win.
Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Your Worship, to you, to Mark. Again, I'd like to say thank you as well. Although I am a little upset about this, because this took me a year. It actually took me finally to bring a motion forward. When I spoke to a manager that's no longer with us, trying to get this study done like 3/4 a year ago or more. But I'm glad that we had it done, and that you believe that we do need it in Tilbury. I have a motion on the floor on this. The only reason I had it, I originally asked the clerk to move it back to next month, so it could actually be voted on, but I was told it'd probably be around 30,000, so even though we're lame duck, we could vote that through. But obviously we're lame duck, and it's 80,000 by the looks of this, so I would like to take that motion off the floor, if I can do that now.
At the time, no.
No?
Later.
Okay.
No.
All right. But, so this will be high priority in the budget, correct? It'll be something that will definitely be high priority for these areas.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. So the process is we take all of these requests along with all the other capital requests, we prioritize them, we bring that to council, and you make the final decision of the order of the priorities. We have approximately close to $5.8 million in our capital budget, which will include all the capital items of Chatham-Kent. So that is your decision. And I just wanted to remark that once that's approved, we go through the purchasing process and tender the work as well. So that's part of the delay, as along with the engineering that Mark mentioned. Thank you.
So we'd basically probably be looking at next September for them to be up and running for the new school year. But I want to make sure this is, in all locations, a high priority. This is safety concerns, not how smooth the road is, but how safe our kids are. We have well over 200 kids that are in this area throughout the summer for soccer. That's not including other family members or smaller kids that aren't playing. So basically on a weekend, we have 300 to 400 people in that soccer fields right behind the high school and next to it in the hydro area. So this is utmost important to Tilbury. So I just want to make sure that it's up there. Thank you.
Seeing no further comments, Councillor Fluker, motion to receive for information. So moved, seconded. Councillor Wesley, all those in favor? Those opinions carried. Councillor Fluker, now you may proceed with the other one.
I'm glad we got the first one done. That's great. That's great. The next one is 10B5, Queens Line and Merlion Road, which has been an ongoing issue of traffic. And I hate to say this, really like what you're recommending. I don't know I think it came from you probably, Mark, and not from anybody else in Public Works. Oh, I'm sorry, Thomas. But This is the same thing as the crosswalks. It has to be approved budget, and then it's going to get done. But this is a real solution, and bluntly, Mr. Kelly, it's the most inexpensive solution. What do you call it? A roundabout would be so expensive, take so much time. I don't think you look closely at how big that creek is at that intersection. That would be something, a roundabout, but I think this is well worth trying a 5-year. I actually, as I was driving in tonight, I thought this is even brighter than I've ever dreamed of, and I really appreciate this, and I'm hoping the next council approves these things, both the first one and the second one, very, very quickly. Very quickly. I think these two are a no-brainer, the crosswalk and certainly this Merlin Town line and Queens line. Thank you, whoever is responsible.
Seeing no further comments, Councillor Fluker, motion to receive, please. It's been moved. Councillor Fluker, seconder. Councillor Robertson, all those in favor? Opposed, abstaining, it's carried. Next item on the agenda deals with notice of motions. Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
Thank you, and through the mayor. I, Councillor Carmen McGregor, hereby provide notice that I will bring forward the following motion at the December 10th, 2018 meeting for discussion and voting. I move that, one, administration be directed to allow representatives from the 2018 United Way of Chatham-Kent campaign access to the municipal staff to provide education and materials in regard to 40-plus local services, support services that are currently currently receiving contributions from United Way. Two, that this be coordinated representative of United and access to the completion of this year's campaign. And three, administration assist employees if they choose to make a contribution through payroll deduction. And four, administration provide a fulsome report back to council before June of 2019 detailing the different campaigns that have been conducted, the choices that staff have had over the past 5 years, the types of assistance they have received regarding to education and contribution choices.
Further notice of motions? And seeing none. Let's move on to the next item dealing with tender awards. Let's deal with the first item.
Item 12A, tender award for Beaver Creek Drain, Upper Portion, and West Branch, Community of Harwich.
Councillor Herman, please.
So moved, Mayor Hope.
It's been moved, seconded by Councillor Wesley. Comments, questions? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 12B, Morris Line over Drain, Government Drain Number 1, Bridge Replacement, Community of Tilbury East.
Councillor Fluker, please.
Pleased to move the Morris Line Bridge.
It's been seconded by Councillor Oche. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask council to consider the recommendation now before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
Councillor Verkuderin.
Frank, please.
Councillor Bondi. All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Let's deal with the next item, please.
Item 12C, results of request for proposal R18-233, developing affordable housing, option 2.
Okay, Shelley, please. You have 2 slides you need to explain.
He came for the Morris Line Bridge and he's been out.
Thank you, Mayor Hope, members of council. I just wanted to say a few comments just while Shelley is pulling up the slide. In September, we presented the results of our affordable housing RFP to council. On that night, recommendations 2, 3, and 4 were approved. Recommendation 1, council requested that be deferred until the November 19th council meeting, which is why we've come back tonight. Planning work continues with a zoning request. Will be coming to council at a future meeting, so that is not ready for this evening, as you are already aware. to ensure that Chatham-Kent receives its share of funding from the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs. Shelley, our Director of Housing, has worked with our ministry contacts. She's worked with our RFP proponents to present to Council our option 2 tonight. And this will ensure that all of the dollars allocated to CK stay within CK. So our recommendation number 1 remains to defer the Dolson property until zoning is complete. And options 2, 3, and 4 are to redistribute funding, as I've indicated, to ensure that we use all available resources from the ministry. So I've asked Shelley to prepare a couple of slides to, one, allow us to look at what was presented and approved last time, and then what our option 2 recommendations are, with some shifting around of pots of money so that we keep all those funds here in CK. So I'll turn it over to Shelley.
Welcome, Shelley.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. So on the screen above you right now is what I presented at the October 1st council meeting. And so you can see the funding that we had committed for 2018 is $1.875 million for the investment in affordable housing extension, $548,625 for the social infrastructure investment in affordable housing, a municipal base budget for affordable housing of $800,000. We also sold 11 Cecil project for $500,000, but out of that money we paid for the realtor's commission fee, and we also covered the cost of hiring Vink Consulting. So that net amount is $460,634. Previously, I made recommendations that you have before you on how to divvy up that money. The recommendations were based on the order that the RFP results reflected, and it had been anticipated that the planning report for 18 Dolson was to come before council on October 1st. As you know, that didn't happen, and so council deferred but asked for the report to come back tonight, and so that's why we're here. Yeah, thank you. So option 2 in your report is using the same funding again, but reallocating it slightly different. So the 25 Michener Road proposal moves up in order of ranking, and same amount of money, but slightly different on the IAHE money and the Municipal Reserve Fund money. 51 Kirk Street does not change as far as where the funding money is proposed to come from. And recommendation number 4 is now 2E, which moves up in the order for $928,777 to be allocated this year. The 2019 base budget would include another $800,000 for affordable housing, and so we're recommending that if council approves the rezoning in when it comes forward, I believe it's going to be in December now, that we would fund it completely out of the Municipal Affordable Housing Reserve. And you can see the net amount of the Municipal Affordable Housing Reserve would be the same, $365,482 for either way of doing it. I have received a letter from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs reaffirming the use it or lose challenge that we face if we don't get our submissions in and contribution agreements registered on title before the end of the year. So hence the need to get back to council and get this approved as soon as we can so that we don't lose the funding options. So happy to answer any questions.
Any comments, questions from council? It's pretty straightforward. Councilor Wesley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Shelley, just more of a question. When I'm looking at the proposed projects on Michener, Kirk, and St. Clair Street. Do any of those projects require a zoning change to allow different housing?
25 Mitchener Road went through a rezoning process last year, and so it's already properly zoned and ready to go. The 5134 St. Clair property is already zoned to allow for multi-res. So they have some vacant area of their current property that contains Clairview Estates that they're able to expand on. Right now at the front of the property they have a man-made crested hill that they can take out and build there.
I guess maybe with your answer, I probably should have rephrased my question a different way, was on those three locations where there's existing housing, has the zoning to allow different housing changed since those whatever existing houses are there, or was that zoning in place a long time ago?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. So for 25 Mitchener Road, the proponent that currently owns it had been a proponent for a previous affordable housing program, and hence the reason why the rezoning was gone through previously. St. Clair Estates is an existing social housing property, but I think I can assure you that normally what happens for affordable housing projects, when proponents submit, probably our experience is 8 times out of 10 they're not going to have the proper zoning in place already. And so I would urge council to think about that when we go through the RFP process, we're asking proponents to find land that might be suitable for building affordable housing. The likelihood that they're going to find a property that is already properly zoned for it is very low. And so if we stymie the whole process and require them to have rezoning prior to applying for affordable housing, putting in an RFP submission, you're really going to limit getting submissions. It's normally a costly process to go through rezoning, and most developers aren't willing to do that for affordable housing projects without some assurance of being approved for the funding.
And I appreciate that. I just want to make a very simple comment just to put things into context, because I've been listening to the people involved with 18 Dolson, and as I can understand it, this is how I see the issue. And I'll use myself as an example. I buy a house, and there's vacant land on the other side of that house. When I buy that house, I want to know what that property is zoned for, because I want to know what may happen down the road. You could end up having whatever built behind your house. If that property is already zoned or close to what ends up going in there, then that's okay. You know what? I knew that. The problem with 18 Dolson is that, as I understand it, we're making quite a change to what that property was zoned for. So people bought properties, and you had a church and other properties back there, which is a pretty quiet, pretty peaceful existence. And now, and this is nothing to do with social housing, from what I understand, it's more to do with the fact that the houses going in there are going to be 2 stories. So now, I've got my house there, vacant field. I had invested into that house, understood what could go there. And now what is happening is that it's going to be changed, and I'm now going to have a back window potentially peering into my backyard when I didn't expect that. It's a little bit of a logistical way to look at it, but I just feel that there's issues there when there's land that's already zoned a certain way and people bought houses thinking it was going to be like that we have to take that into consideration more often than we do. I know I won't get a chance to vote on that issue tonight because it's been put over to the new council, but I did want to share my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mayor Hope, if I can comment on that. The current institutional zoning does allow for a residence to be built there if it's mainly for seniors. So it could be a multi-residential mainly for seniors. We didn't agree to that because we didn't put out an RFP asking for a seniors development. But really, if this proponent wasn't to buy the property, or even if he did choose to buy it, and the zoning's not passed, he could build the same property and say it's for seniors, and it wouldn't require rezoning.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Bondi, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Just so that we're clear, if we pass option 2 this evening, just for all the people sitting behind you, which are here because of 18 Dolson, this has no effect on 18 Dolson, correct? I went through a lot of emails today just to be crystal, as you were involved with me for most of the day through electronic media. Tonight has zero to do with 18 Dolson, correct? Just so that we're all clear.
That is correct. Thank you, Mayor Hope. The only thing it does for 18 Dolson is to preserve the integrity of the RFP process. This proponent scored the highest on the RFP, and so we don't want to have to go through the procurement process again if council rezones the property, that hopefully they would also endorse funding the property.
Right, so if the zoning changes in favor of the new build, we see where the money's going to come from, which is not through outside funding, it's from the municipality. But of course, this is all contingent upon the zoning passing at the next meeting or whenever it comes out.
That's correct.
Great, thank you.
Further comments? Councillor Van Dam, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Through you to Ms. Wilkins. So when 18 Dolson does come up in the new year, how is it going to be approached to the planning department?
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, Councillor, could you just repeat that? I was at the back of the room.
Well, just a few moments ago, Ms. Wilkins addressed Councillor Wesley's concern with saying if it goes into a senior complex, it doesn't need to go through a zoning amendment. And that's very coy, but in reality, if it's a two-story affordable housing complex, it is what it is. So how is it going to be zoned in the future?
Well, at this point, we do have the application before us. And as I mentioned back in October, I wasn't confident that would be ready for tonight's meeting because we're still waiting on some information, and we have to give 3 weeks lead time for notification. So at this point, rather than debating the merits of a zoning application on the floor tonight, I don't think that's fair because we're still working on a report. I would suggest that I can confidently say the application notice will be mailed this Thursday to all residents, and it will be scheduled for the December 17th council meeting.
Still a little concerned through you, Mayor Hope. It's still going to be, it's not going to be a senior's home. It's going to be an affordable housing complex. So is it going to be one story or two?
I want us to be careful because we're treading into the planning side of things versus the proposal that is here. I understand where you're trying to get to, but I want to be careful that this is not a planning merits debate. This is about the funding envelope that Shelley has come to us and said, we have this money, you approved it one way, came back and says, I moved it around a bit, and I want council to know I moved it around, and this is how I'm moving it around, and she's asking for endorsement. A lot of it is subject to 18 Dolson being approved. If it's not approved, the question is, what happens to that $1.4 million that's sitting there that's allocated for housing initiatives? That's what I'd like to know is, what if it's not approved? What happens to the housing initiative of 1.47?
If council does not approve endorsing this project, then the $1.47 million remains in the affordable housing reserve of the municipality. It does not affect the application for funding that we're applying for under the investment in affordable housing or the social infrastructure investment in affordable housing.
So there could be a new proposal, an RFP go out that we could still put some housing initiatives in place, correct?
Yes, we would have that option.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Van Dam, I didn't want us to get into planning. It's just about what happens to this money.
I'll stop. I can go a lot deeper, but I won't.
Well, it's not a planning debate, and that's why I wanted to just understand what happens to money here.
No, through you again, Mayor Hope. There were comments made about two-story buildings looking into backyards, and I know the decision 18 months ago was made, and I can look at that 460, 634, and that's a lot lower than $750,000 as well, and I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I totally understand that. Councillor Foss, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move the recommendations.
It's been moved by Councillor Foss, seconded by Councillor Brock McGregor. Any further comments? Seeing none, I would ask Council now to consider the recommendation now before you. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Our next item is community development. Let's deal with the first item.
Item 13A, application for exemption for part lot control, PL 201800143-1042653, Ontario Inc., 291 to 327 Davis Street East, Community Dresden.
Councillor Foss, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation.
It's been moved by Councillor Foss, seconded by Councillor Brock McGregor. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Let's deal with the next one.
Item 13B, application for site plan control, PL 201800153, Chatham-Kent Health Alliance, 325 Margaret Avenue, Community Wallaceburg.
Councillor Wesley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move the recommendations in the report with a smile.
And I take it second with a bigger smile as Councillor Carmen McGregor. Yes, please. Okay, so noted. 14A.
Financial interest on 14A.
Yes.
Okay, so I won't be voting for it.
Yeah. So, Councillor Wesley, comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just very briefly, I just wanted to publicly thank Lori Marshall and her leadership team and the new board that they have in place for moving forward with this. And they gave our word they were going to do so, and they have. And it means a lot to myself and the entire community of Wallaceburg and North Kent. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments, I would now ask Council to consider the recommendation before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
Councillor Verkuderin. All votes are in. Motion passes 15-1.
Our next item, please.
Item 13C, cyber liability insurance purchase.
Councillor Fluker.
Pleased to move this motion.
It's been moved by Councillor Fluker, seconded by Councillor Brock McGregor. Comments or questions? Councillor Solomon, please.
Thank you, Worship. I had a couple questions. One is, through your Worship, to administration. Does our procurement policy have any bearing on this? I mean, put simply, at $50,000, are we supposed to tender or do a request for proposal or shop the price, or do we just go with our current carrier?
I'll look to either John or to Mike, please.
Your Worship, we have a RFP that went out for brokerage services, and during the period of the time when our broker has the contract, it is his job to go out and procure insurance policies for us at the lowest price, and that's what we've done in this instance.
Okay. So that's within the current authority that's already been granted on the RFP that went, I don't know, a year ago?
I don't remember exactly when it went, but a year or two ago, yes.
Okay. Good, thank you. The second question is, and I don't see it in the report, I take it that this is both first-party insurance, which is for those who aren't involved in insurance, direct losses by the municipality, and third-party coverage for claims that there may be by victims who say they had a loss as a result of something occurring with the municipality. I take it it's both coverage. It just isn't in the report. That's the only reason I'm asking.
Your Worship, it is. Our broker's here in the room if there's any specific questions about the first or third party liability coverage, but it is both.
That's all I needed to know. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Further comments? Seeing none, I ask you now to consider the recommendation before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Next item on the agenda deals with infrastructure and engineering services. Let's deal with the first item.
Item 14A, encroachment agreement, 36 Talbot Street West, Blenheim.
Councillor Vakuder, and just so I'm clear, this is the one that you had a... Okay, so noted. We have this up. Councillor Herman, please.
So moved, Mayor Hope.
It's been moved by Councillor Herman, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any comments or questions from Council? Councillor Thompson, please.
This, through your worship, this is more about process. I'm kind of curious as to why council would be deciding, or even why did this come to council in the first place? Why are we talking about 4 streetlights on a commercial building in a commercial area?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. It's our policy to bring encroachment agreements to council for approval.
Even something like, what are we encroaching on? Air rights? I'm just curious, when we sit here and we talk about boilerplate answers about efficiencies and transparencies and cutting red tape, this seems like a ridiculous amount of red tape for 4 streetlights.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. So that the issue here is basically hanging the luminaires onto the building. So we're seeking approval to have this agreement in place.
But anytime somebody puts something on the outside of their building, like an awning or something in downtown Blenheim, they'll have to come to council to do it?
It's our street lights that are, there are lights. So we're utilizing a building for our lights.
They're our lights? Huh, interesting. All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Next item.
Item 14B, historical streetlights. Notice of motion.
Councillor Thompson, you brought this forward.
Yes, I did, and I'd be happy to move it.
Okay, moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Herman. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Before we go to the next one, Councillor Oche, this is the one that you're making reference to earlier. I notice you've got it labeled as notice of motion. You've heard the report tonight. Is there any reason why a notice of motion?
Because this notice of motion was done before the report came in.
So I'm just wondering, is it just dying?
Yes, as long as it's going to be in the budget.
Well, you'll have to make sure it's in the budget, but I'm just saying there's not a required that you postpone the notice of motion or everything, because I think the information today has told you it will be in the budget process.
Correct.
And
that's why
the discussion you'll have to follow.
I said I was going to withdraw it because also it's over the 80,000, so or over the 50,000, so we couldn't vote on it anyways today.
So you're withdrawing your notice of motion.
Correct.
A withdrawal. Just I didn't want it to be shown on the records. It's supposed to come later. It's actually being dropped.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda deals with finance, budget, and information technology, and let's deal with the first item.
Item 15A, 2019 interim tax levy, due dates and borrowing bylaws.
Councillor Brockman-Gregor, please.
I'll move the recommendations.
It's been moved, seconded by Councillor Myers. Comments or questions? Seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 15B, offer to purchase 319 and 325 Park Street, Chatham.
Councillor Bondi, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I'll be happy to move the recommendation.
And seconded by Councillor Caniff. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, although I'd ask you now to consider the recommendation before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 15C, offer to purchase 25 Richmond Street, Chatham.
Councillor Bondi.
Well, thank you once again, Mayor Hope, and I'd be happy to move the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Myers. Comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation before you. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 15D, offer to purchase 323 to 327 Queen Street, Wallaceburg.
Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
I'd be pleased to move the motion. Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Wesley. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation now before you. Let's turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 15E, offer to purchase 88 Duke Street, Wallaceburg.
Councillor Wesley, please.
I would move the recommendations, Your Worship.
It's been seconded by Councillor Carmen McGregor. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 15F, offer to purchase 56 Kirk Street, Chatham.
Councillor Myers, please.
Your Worship, I'd move the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Brock McGregor. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 15G, offer to purchase 430 Colburn Street, Chatham.
Councillor Brock McGregor, please.
I'll move the recommendation.
It's been moved by Councillor Brock McGregor, seconded by Councillor Caniff. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All those in favor, 15-1. Motion passes. Sorry.
Next item is corporate services. Let's deal with the first item.
Item 16A, appointment bylaws.
Councillor Wesley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move the recommendations in the appointment bylaws report.
It's been moved by Councillor Wesley, seconded by Councillor Foss. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation been brought before you. I will turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Next item on the agenda.
Item 16B, a motion by Councillor Caniff regarding council meetings.
Thank you, Your Worship. Whereas the current Chatham-Kent procedural bylaw states all regular meetings of the council shall be held in the council chambers of the municipality of Chatham-Kent, 315 King Street West, Chatham, second floor, or at such other place within the municipality as council may from time to time determine. And whereas a proposed calendar is presented by the clerk's office to council for approval by December of each year, detailing the dates for all regular council meetings in the subsequent year. And whereas it is important for council to have a presence throughout all communities within the municipality of Chatham-Kent. Therefore, it is requested that a report to council be prepared by administration outlining the logistics of holding 2 council meetings in each of the larger communities over a 4-year council term. These communities include Ridgetown, Blenheim, Tilbury, Wheatley, Wallaceburg, Dresden, Thamesville, and Bothwell. This report should include potential locations within communities, eligibility to hold general public seating, how electronic voting may occur, use of microphones, media coverage including Cogeco television, etc. This report would be submitted to the new council after December 2018.
Seconder, Councillor Pinsnow. Councillor Caniff, you have the floor.
Yes, pretty straightforward. We're just looking for a report to talk about the logistics of having some council meetings outside of this chamber. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bondi, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. One thing I'd be interested in including in this, which I didn't see, is cost in the report. What's it going to cost the taxpayer to run this circus around town? So could we make that an amendment, or if it's just agreed upon? I think it's pretty important that we know if it's going to cost us like $15,000 to move a meeting, we probably won't want to do that. But if it's much cheaper than that, just if it could be included in that information. I don't know if I have to make this a friendly.
I'm going to suggest to the one who's putting the motion forward, if you wouldn't mind including the.
Inherently, that's what I expected in the report as well. Is all this talking about all this, but the cost of it.
Oh, okay.
Well.
I just didn't.
So
see
inherently, throughout
money.
all this, yes,
It'll be included in.
Would include yes costs.
All right, fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Van Dam, please.
Through you, Mayor Hope, if I may ask, who would be in charge of preparing this report?
To the CAO, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. It would be under Kathy Hoffman's jurisdiction in the Clerk's Department. We'd be the ones that would be looking at the
Okay,
report.
so where I'm going with this, through you again, Mayor Hope, is roughly when you guys see this for the first time, how many staff hours would have to go into preparing this kind of report?
I'm sorry, I can't estimate that. I don't know.
Nobody can give you an answer. Councillor Pinstone.
Thank you, Worship. I like the idea of going out to the surrounding communities. I don't know logistically how it's going to work, but I think it's beneficial for all council members if we get to the different communities. And I think it's a great way to get the people of the rural communities, whichever ones you're going to get a little bit more involved into municipal matters. So I will be supporting this. Thanks.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Your Worship. The question that was just asked by Councillor Van Dam, no one could answer it at this point in time, but the motion says logistics. And I take it that the word logistics, through you to the mover, logistics includes the costs of doing this, and those costs would include the administrative time, or at least I expect them to, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the administrative time in developing the report as well. I mean, I want to know what all the costs are.
If you want to make it as a
Well,
friendly amendment or as an amendment.
We solved one part by asking through your worship to the mover.
Yes.
And I'm doing the same, following the same process. I mean, you want to know all the costs.
Certainly, over the last 4 years, whenever we've asked for something, I think this is the very first time we've actually asked for what the sunk costs are, number of hours, and actually try to factor it into our decision. I've heard several decisions made here and of the time that it would take council or administration to put this. I mean, certainly they can give an idea to say, yes, we put 100 hours or 200 hours, whatever it's going to be, 50 hours, I don't know. But they can include that in saying, yeah, we spent approximately this amount of time.
Okay. Well, as long as it's going to be in there, and I do think we have done that in the past.
Yes.
When we did the IPM, we asked how much time the administration was going to spend. On a lot of things, we asked how much time the administration was going to spend on it. So it's not unusual. I just want to make sure it's there, that's all. And this is just a motion to get a report, so I'm in favor of getting a report. But you want to make sure when it comes back, it's got everything in it, so you can make the decision.
Seeing no further. Councillor Solomon, are you comfortable with the replies you got?
Well, I didn't see any nodding from administration, but I take it they're going to, if I don't hear otherwise, I'm going to take it that they're going to put all the costs in. Otherwise, I'll be asking for them, and it will delay things.
I'm hearing a yes movement over to my peripheral view side here, over here, so I'm going to take it that you've been heard.
That's what I like to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further comment, closing remarks, Councillor Kenneth?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Ask Council now to consider the notice of motion before you. So the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Councillors, next item on the agenda deals with CK Plan 2035 update on achievements and progress. Don, you have the floor.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to start by saying I just noticed a misprint in the agenda. There is no palace coup or an attempt to become the chief executive officer by this CAO, so apologies for the error there. Your Worship, the purpose of tonight is just to take a few minutes to celebrate some of the successes of the past council. Often we're so busy, engaged in activities that sometimes we don't pause to reflect on some of the things that have been occurred. And just like to, with your indulgence, walk through a couple of the items that council has achieved over the last 4 years of the term of council. So council, remember, we had an integrated planning cycle over the course of the last 4 years. We received priority from council. You determined that the priority was jobs, people, and health. High priorities. It was fairly consistent over the last 2 terms of council. We drew up business plans to make sure that all of the different business units would undertake to achieve council's directions. We went out, we consulted every year over year. There were budgets, and then we reported back to our taxpayers and council as a whole to reflect on what we've been able to achieve with the investments that council had made. So a few of the highlights, just like to share with council. This community in 2009 was the highest unemployment rate, or one of the highest unemployment rates in the province of Ontario. In the last several years, we've been tracking under the provincial and national average. We've been hovering in the 5 to 6% range for many of the last 12 months. It's an outstanding achievement, and this council has consistently invested in economic development and done whatever they can to make sure that this community is a more attractive place. We still have a ways to go, and that's certainly been reflected in the priorities council continues to give to us, but that's real improvement, and I think the community and council should be celebrating that. In resident attraction, we can't grow too much until the next census, but in 2016 or 2016, we had the census results. We had dropped to about 101,000 people. I'm very pleased to report that the Ministry of Finance regularly updates or does projections on an annual basis. Actually, in the last 2 weeks, after the slide presentation was put together, I actually heard back from the Ministry of Finance that the 2018 reflection has actually been now up over 106,000 people. So turning that curve is extremely difficult to do, and council has given us a number of supports for that, and administration's worked hard to achieve that. Some of the more notable recognitions are the work that we did to become the first welcoming community in Canada. A number of other highlights over the last 12 months or so. We were identified as the 67th top Canadian millennial hotspots. And if you would have told me we would have done that, 4 or 5 years ago, I would have been shocked. I mean, it's a huge achievement to start reflecting on what we're trying to do to attract young adults to Chatham-Kent. So the fact that we're on the radar screen and we're moving up, I think, is really worth celebrating. We've also been moving up significantly from 2017 to 2018 as one of Canada's best places to live. That's a myriad of different factors that go into that mix. But we're moving up significantly, and again, this is a consistent effort to try and achieve council's priorities. I think it's pretty significant. That's not the only things we've done. We continue to hear that transportation is a concern, but over the past term of council, we've looked at different plans for public busing. We passed a bylaw to deal with Uber or Lyft services to augment our taxi services. So we're taking some steps. There was a new bylaw completed on that. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list of everything that was done. I mean, there were many other pieces. We had, with financial support from the provincial government, we had a Healthy Kids program, Super Kids. We also saw the completion of the hospice that this council had funded the previous term, and we've also got a great head start on the animal shelter. So those are some very significant things, and I think taking a moment to celebrate that and reflect on it is really appropriate, especially given the fact that there's a number of folks in this council chambers that will not be returning. I think you can walk out and be happy. I was delighted that Councillor Wesley got to have that smile on his face for that motion about the hospital as well. Thank you, Laurie. That was great. I was afraid you'd be coming back another term, Councillor Wesley, if you didn't get that, so I was delighted. There's just a trend line for our seasonal adjusted average, and you can just see this is our unemployment figures. Again, it's continuing to go down. That's only 2017, but we dropped again in 2018. I think it's also important, we had a couple of questions or discussions a few minutes ago about our debt and our financial management. I think it's also important as we've gone ahead and tried to achieve our objectives, we've also been very successful in paying down our debt and being very financially responsible. And our credit rating has improved as a result. I think it's just a great news story. Kudos to all the council, but also Mike and the team have done some very heavy lifting to put together a long-term financial plan. That's what our debt reduction looks like. It sets up our future council and our residents for being able to make some much easier choices, given that we're in a much better financial situation. So that's just a summary. This is a slide that you've seen before in our budget presentations, and the new council will be receiving again. So again, the work's not finished, but this current term of council has done a great job to get a strong foundation built. The plan will be that we'll be going back again to look at the council priorities after our new council has had the opportunity to reflect on the budget. And hopefully for the new council members in particular, it gives you a great opportunity to understand the scope of our services that we provide to our citizens. We'll be coming back again probably in March to seek council's direction on what your priorities will be for the next term of council. And that's a critical piece that council plays in terms of giving administration direction as to where should we be putting our focus. You know, you've all come through a recent election, the new council members or the newly elected council, and you've heard a huge amount of input from our residents, and that needs to be captured and shared. So in the short term, we'll be going out and asking you to provide some comments about what are the major priorities that you've heard from your constituents, and that could be built into the mix or the exercise that we'll be doing in terms of direction setting for the next 4 years. So that will be coming to you shortly. And again, we'll be back in our planning cycle, and hopefully we'll be again celebrating in 4 years' time, and thanking council for their leadership and administration for their hard work to support council's initiatives. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. It is my distinct pleasure now to move on to the next agenda item when the chair is prepared to recognize, but you may have some questions or thoughts.
Any comments or questions? If none, then I just need a motion to receive. So moved by Councillor Solomon, seconded by Councillor Carmen McGregor. And all those in favor? Opposed, if any, and is carried. Go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next item, it's my honor to recognize and present a token of appreciation to the 9 council members that will not be returning for the next term. And to do that exercise, I'm going to ask if Councillor Falls and Councillor Solomon could join me in the center. Judy is going to assist us and read some memorable statistics about those that will not be returning. But if you could join me in the front, please. Thank you.
Don't be afraid. It's none of that kind of stuff. Okay, so our first one is Brian Fluker. Councillor Fluker was elected in 1972 for the 1973 council. He remained a councillor until he was elected mayor of Tilbury in 1992. He remained mayor until amalgamation, and he became a Chatham-Kent councillor from 1998 to 2018. Councillor Brian Fluker had 46 years of political background. Next, Councillor Karen Herman. Councillor Karen Herman has been a Chatham-Kent councillor from 2003 to 2018. She has 15 years of experience. Next councillor is Councillor Leon Leclerc, who is not here this evening. He is a Chatham-Kent councillor from 2010 to 2018, 8 years of experience. Next is Councillor Bob Myers. Councillor Myers served as an alderman from 1983 until 1985, and then became a Chatham-Kent councillor from 2010 to 2018. He has 10 years. Next is Councillor Derek Robertson. Councillor Robertson was a Chatham-Kent councillor from 2010 to 2018 with 8 years of experience. Next is Councillor David Van Dam. Councillor Van Dam became a Chatham-Kent councillor from 2014 to 2018 with 4 years of experience. Next is Councillor Frank Verkouteren. Councillor Verkouteren was a councillor for the town of Ridgetown from 1978 to 1980. He became a councillor for the town of Blenheim from 1980 to 1990. He was the reeve of the town of Blenheim from 1991 to 1993, and back to a councillor from 1993 to 1997. At amalgamation, Councillor Verkouteren became a Chatham-Kent councillor from 1998 to 2018. Councillor Verkouteren has 40 years under his belt. Councillor Jeff Wesley. Councillor Wesley was a councillor for the town of Wallaceburg from 1985 to 1988. He became the deputy reeve in County of Kent from 1988 to 1991, and the mayor of the town of Wallaceburg from 1991 until amalgamation. He served twice as Chatham-Kent councillor from 1998 to 2000, and then again in 2010 to 2018. Councillor Wesley has 24 years. And finally, we have Mayor Hope. Mayor Hope has been the Chatham-Kent mayor from 2006 to 2018 with 12 years under his belt.
Yeah. Our next item on the agenda deals with the approval of communicated items. So moved by Councillor Pincinel, second by Councillor Foss. Any items of interest? And seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, and is carried. Non-agenda business items? Seeing none. I'm going to move to the reading of the... Oh, sorry. Councillor Roche, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to thank, and I'm not sure who's putting it on Facebook, but there's a lot of different things happening in Chatham-Kent, and it seems to be getting on Facebook, and I'm sharing them all the time, and people are picking up on them and sharing them and filling out different surveys, and just like the updates. I've got so many people telling me about the updates and also answering to putting different things on whatever they see on Facebook. So whoever's doing that, great job on the social media. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further, I'm going to move the first and second readings, but just so you know that item number 14 is not going to be a part of this. 14 on the bylaws. E14 is not a part of the bylaw approvals, so I just want to make sure that's on the record. So I'm going to move the first and second reading. So moved by Councillor Solomon, seconded by Councillor Verkuterin. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and it's carried. Shall council go into committee? Seeing not. Third and final reading. So moved by Councillor Brock-McGregor, seconded by Councillor Oche. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and it's carried. And resolution of council. Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
Thank you, and through the mayor, I would move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, December 10th, 2018, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act.
It's been moved by Councillor Carmen McGregor, seconded by Councillor Brock McGregor. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it's been carried, and good night.